Now, one of those using this trade relationship with China is wine exporter and Gunbay Wines owner Andrew Ng. I spoke to him about how he's benefiting from the expo.
Andrew, thanks so much for speaking to us. We've just had a conversation with Philip Myberg on the China Africa Economic Trade Expo, and we know you were a part of that as Gunbay Wine. So let's talk a little bit about your business, how you started, and certainly the progress that you've made over the last few years before signing some of those deals that you did in Hong Kong, I think in 2019.
Yeah, my business is obviously I'm a wine exporter, and I started the business in 2019, and I started it from scratch without any knowledge of the wine industry. I had some export experience, which was fortunate in fruit and seafood from my sort of blue chip company days when I worked for the blue chips, and I put that to good use and used some creativity to get my brand going. The main question was what was my wine going to be called, and where was I going to bottle it? And there were it's a lot of struggle that you have to go through to try and get a brand in any product established, and no different in wine. So at that time, the Far East, especially China, was seen as a huge growth market for wine, massive growth market. And I thought, okay, I'm going to target that. Came up with a name that is actually a subtle pun on the traditional Chinese toast for cheers, which is Gunbay. You know, if you spelt that, it would be Ganbei. But I thought we've got some heritage in Cape Town with the Noon Gun, and we have Table Bay, and there's a great brand to try and get into China and tie in tradition with our heritage. The first thing I had to do was to trademark the brand. I took good advice from some industry specialists, and they just said, trademark your brand as a first stop. So I spent good money on that with attorneys, and we got our trademark certificate from Beijing and several other countries. So I have the IP secure, and then it was a question of trying to get wine in the bottle and find the markets.
Getting into business is no mean task, but it's a totally different kettle of fish. If your first port of call is, let me get into business and immediately export, what are some of the challenges that you faced in that process?
The challenges are, I'd say the biggest challenge is a customer base. You've got a product. It's all very well to get the creative side of you going well and getting a brand and something in the bottle, and you're finding a local product. To find the market, if you're not in that industry, is challenging. So I used LinkedIn a lot, and I was emailing and phoning and connecting as much as possible. Networking is critical. LinkedIn is a really valuable tool for that. And I found that I was able to touch base with several customers, importers in a couple of markets, and that was my sort of breakthrough. And then on top of that, because I was a new startup, I was able to apply for Department of Trade and Industry funding, the EMIA assistance, export management, export marketing, investment assistance. And that was really good because they provided funding for me to get to the Hong Kong International Wine and Spirits Fair in late 2019, November 2019. So, yeah, there are significant challenges. And if you've got some export experience, that obviously helps, which I did have in the fruit and the seafood. And you've got to be a salesman. If you're starting any business, you have to be a salesman. So I like to think I can sell something, and you've got to just put all your skills together and have a bit of cojones, and you need a bit of cash to get going.
So let's fast forward a little bit. 4 years ago, you were launching your product. In fact, you were out at the Hong Kong Wine and Spirits Fair. 2023, you've just come back from CAETE, which, from what I understand, was a massive, massive exhibition. Let's talk about your relationship with Standard Bank and how that has facilitated certainly your exposure and potential business.
Yeah, absolutely, Hugo. I mean, yeah, I've always banked with Standard Bank, and they've given me opportunities before this trip where I've exhibited my wines at some of the exhibitions in China, which were obviously virtual at that time, a couple of years ago. No one was traveling. The world was locked down. So they gave me those opportunities. And then out of the blue, this one arose, and they very generously, with their partners in China, ICBC, their shareholding, joint shareholding in the bank, they invited us with Wesgro to China, and the hotels were all paid for by the Hunan provincial government, which was very kind of them. And this was just a magnificent opportunity at a huge trade show, as you said. It was under, I think, close to 100,000 square meters under roof. amazing. And there was a big pavilion that Standard Bank had there, and there were 7 or 8 South African wineries, and there was coffee and fruit exporters and various other products, but quite a good spread of wine. So it was a superb opportunity to experience, firstly, Chinese food and beverage and culture and hospitality, and at the same time have an excellent exposure to business opportunities in the wine business in China. It was my first visit to China, so everything was new. It was magnificent.
If we look at the Chinese population, it's over 1 billion people. Just how much an opportunity does this offer you and certainly other business people on the African continent?
Well, that's a huge point there, because their population is 1.4 billion, 700 million consumer market with disposable income is just anyone's dream. And when you look at, in particular, when you look at wine consumption, the global per capita wine consumption, the highest is Portugal, I believe, which is about 60 liters odd per capita per annum. And in China, it's only 1.5 liters. So you've got this vast market to tap into. And the same applies for many other agri products where Africa is not doing enough business yet in China, but certainly for wine, the opportunities are huge once that 700 million population starts drinking wine in good volume. We're well placed.